Hare Krishna, everyone. I'm very impressed with the slides you showed and the announcements. It was really beautiful. And I know that you've been together, many of you, and for decades, and working on this community. And I'm honored to be here. I'm here with my wife, Anira Kula Devi Dasi, sitting behind the camera. You can take a look at her. And we come from California. We live in a house. And we like Krishna consciousness. We like communities. We like you guys. And really happy to be here. I offer my respectful obeisances to Srila Prabhupada and to all of you. Hare Krishna. We've been in Silicon Valley since... Actually, we've been in the Bay Area since correct me if I'm wrong, 1986? 1989. Since 1989. And we got involved with a community there. We had sort of our own small setup from our home in Silicon Valley for many years where we had programs every week. And we had services to do. Mine was in Sankirtan mainly. And we also got the benefit of a small group of devotees moving up from Los Angeles who wanted to start a community in San Jose, which is about 20 minutes from where we live. So Krishna kind of moved closer. They brought deities. And then, through a series of events, the leadership was left open a little bit, and there were just a few young people there. And they came knocking at our door and said, "Would you like to be involved?" And yeah, and we said we did, although we were getting pretty expert at being aloof. And when we got involved, we got together some small meetings with just a few very sincere young devotees there, talking about what they'd like to do. And at the time, they said they wanted to build a temple. And they had a picture of it drawn out. And I said that I wasn't that interested in building something. I thought it would be a better idea if we first built the community. And then if we built a community and we did a service that was, sorry, I hope I didn't wreck everything. We did service that was noticeable by Krishna, that he would come over and drop a temple on our head. And that's what happened. We decided to work together on some worthy goals, which happened to be, include going out to meet people around Silicon Valley and interact with them, give them gifts, accept gifts from them, and work on our own internal processes of working together. And after starting in a little house, the first experience was a small house with full-size Radha Krishna deities in it, because they came up with the devotees. And what happened to us was the same thing that happens traditionally at every Hare Krishna festival or series of festivals. Do you know what that is? Come on, give it a guess. Somebody called the police. That's what always happens at a Hare Krishna festival. Somebody called the police. They said, "You guys are up early. There's a lot of cars being parked around the neighborhood, and you can't do this here." I mean, I said it's traditional because it happened at Srivasangam 500 years ago. Srivas Thakur and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Somebody called the cops. They came and broke drums. There was a demonstration. So after that, we moved to a little storefront, and we had at the storefront, it's one of those little tiny, in America we have what called strip malls. And it was just about 5, 6 shops in a row with big show windows you could walk by. Like I see you have here, like there's a pharmacy, and then some places you can get glasses and other, places like that. So ours was like that with 5 shops. Only in ours, next to the haircutting place and the pizza place and a little computer repair store, then if you looked in the window, you'd see Radha and Krishna, Shishi Radha Madan Mohan, looking back out at you, and Sriman Mahaprabhu. They're together on the same altar. And we saw many people do a double take when they came by and looked in the window and wondered who was that. And then we had Janmashtami there, and the landlord of the place didn't think that was a great idea to try to fit hundreds of people into a tiny little shop and go all night long. So the landlord said, you guys better get out of here and move to another place. So then we got a small commercial building, and a very small commercial building. In fact, when I first saw it, I said out loud that this won't work. And the other devotees said it has to work because we don't have any money, and plus we don't have any other place to go. We have to take this. So we did, and we made it work for 7 years. One thing we found was that we could discover a lot of space that we didn't know was there, using innovations like tarping out parking lots and things like that. And then we discovered that there was a fencing studio across the street that we could use for Janmashtami. And this goes towards community building, in that we sort of developed a spirit that whatever Krishna gives us, we should use that fully before we expect anything else, and try to make the most of wherever we are. And practically we didn't even notice that 7 years had gone by because we were having so much fun. And during those early days, the pioneering days, when we just had a couple of families, we concentrated on a couple things. One was the kids' education. And we started a robust kind of Sunday school program, all-inclusive, so that the young kids could be inculcated with the practices of Krishna consciousness. And the other practice that we had that really bound us together was going out in whatever time we had to distribute books around Silicon Valley. It really started with some small ideas, just devotees going out with a table or two in front of stores and meeting people. We started with the easy places that were Indian stores. And then we started talking about diversification and meeting people from various cultures. And that was interesting because most of our congregation is Indian. But they started to get used to going out and meeting people from various different cultures. And they would even learn little bits of language in Mandarin and Spanish and so forth to do that. And so at first, we just made some small goals. And one of them was that we'd all go out together once a month, and that there'd be no pressure on anybody. It was just for the experience of being together, to go out, to distribute books together. And so we started off with just about 7 devotees going out. And then everyone liked it so much that they said, let's do this every week. And I said, let's not. Let's do it every month and see if we can sustain it. And then after 3 months, the devotees came back and said, this is really hard. Can we do it every other month? And I said, let's not. Let's just do it every month and see if we can sustain it. And after a while, it got integrated into our community, and everyone looked forward to going out together because it was palpable that the experiences people were having, all the devotees were having, in feeling a kind of fresh oxygen coming into the community by going out. I compare it to breathing. that every organism has to breathe. And the exhale is going out into the great unknown, which is the public, where you don't know what's going to happen. And of course, we never know what's going to happen anyway, even if we stay in. But I think I know what's going to happen, and that's kind of boring. But when you go out to meet people or extend yourself without going out, one way or another, there's a kind of sense of exhilaration that what's going to happen. And when you have the camaraderie of others who are doing it at the same time, it becomes a supportive environment. And so in that way, it was sustainable. So we called that outing that we had once a month our monthly Sankirtan festival. Kind of a generic name, but it stuck because we didn't spend a lot of time with branding. We just said, let's call it that, and then that's what it became, and that's known as that in many places now. And so the community grew around the principles of educating kids and also going out together. At one point, I thought, well, why don't we combine the two? So we had quite a few 5-year-olds, and one day, I took about 15 years ago, I arranged with some parents, and I went out with 5-year-olds on book distribution, door to door. I had some parents help me because I didn't know if I could manage 5-year-olds at the same time. And the first, we went door to door together. They were wide-eyed and very eager for the experience. And the first door we went to was an interesting experience. There's a struggle, apparently, to open the door. The knob kept turning, but the door didn't open. And finally, there was what appeared to be a person who was either physically or mentally impaired, maybe both, and a caretaker. And when we explained through the open crack in the door what we were doing, the person who was impaired was very interested. And one of the kids put a book through the crack in the door, and that impaired person grabbed onto it. But for some reason, unknown reason to us, the caretaker didn't want the person to have it. And thus ensued a great battle inside the door, to which the kids were utterly fascinated, their first experience. And back and forth, the door rocked back and forth, the book being pushed back out through the crack in the door and then pulled back in again, over and over again, until finally the book went inside, the door clicked closed, and the kids went, Haribo! They felt as if they had had a victory, and I saw that their energy surged. And we went to the next house, which was a iconic American house with a white picket fence. I don't know if you have that kind of iconography here, but it's supposedly the American dream, where you have a white picket fence. Do you have that kind of stuff here? Mom and apple pie, you don't have that? I guess it's an American thing. So white picket fence and a little house, and everything's great, and the woman standing outside on the porch, apparently collecting her mail, had looked over and seen us, a group, and ascertained just from looking, because living entities are smart, they can figure things out really fast, that we were some sort of a religious organization. And the kids, not having such limitations, I stayed back outside the fence and decided we would pass on that particular house because she said, did the resident, no thank you, I'm a Christian. To which the kids responded by charging through the gate and surrounding her. And they began all at once, because we hadn't gone over this very much, explaining from all different angles what all the imagery in the book was and where it came from, and that Krishna had cows and so forth. To which the woman responded by looking up over the heads of the children and at me outside the gate and saying, all right, how much is it? And then I thought, well, this might work out. not that, I was just looking for what was the experience. And the next day, the teachers at the Sunday school asked the kids what they thought of it, and they were exuberantly enthusiastic. If you can put those two words together, I don't know, maybe it's redundant, but they were into it. And they wanted to do more. And we saw over the years, as they grew up, that there's a kind of education that one gets by going out and meeting people and trying to explain why they should take to Krishna consciousness. First, one has one's own reckoning that, well, am I actually taking it seriously? And then explaining it to others becomes more reasonable, if I am. That's a nice aspect. And then there's just the quantifiable nature of book distribution, in which you can count how many books went out of a box because they're units and you can count them. And therefore you can set goals. And so that makes it measurable, and humans like goals. Whenever you put a ladder up, somebody wants to climb it. That went well for our community to have ever fresh goals to seek on that side. And on the other side, we went on with a robust program of trying to hear and chant as much as possible together and do other devotional activities. And I always felt that going out for book distribution and any kind of outreach is a kind of sadhana. And that staying in and hearing and chanting together is a kind of sadhana. And then I started thinking of them as rice and dal. And rice, as I read in Jamuna's cookbook, is a universal staple. And of course, we know that dal is a amazing food. But when you combine the two, you get 42% more nutrition. There's synergy. The two of them go together, and the bonding of the proteins makes it a superfood. Did you know that? Rice and dal? It's in Jamuna's cookbook. It's a shastra. 42% more nutrition. So having internal hearing and chanting programs, as we do in our practice, and then also having time together to go out and share it with others, makes this synergy. The two things go together into a super sadhana. And this became the basis of our community. So that's an overview. And I have some specific points about community building that have grown from our experience together since 1998 in Silicon Valley, which has grown quite a bit. Starting from just a few kids, now we have over 300 children and quite a few adults to go with them. And also, we've expanded in many other ways in many other departments. And I noted down a few of the key principles for community building and lessons that we've learned during those times that we've been together. And I thought, since the topic was about community building, that perhaps you'd like to hear some of them. Okay, 3 people nod their heads. Everybody else, you have to cover your ears when I read the next part. But before I do read them, I'll just take, if you don't mind, a few reflections from anything I've said so far, because it stimulates the energy. It's kind of like churning the conversation we're having together, which so far hasn't been a conversation, it's been a monologue. So if you would, please reflect back to me anything you heard that you found to be interesting or odd or noteworthy. Yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. When you talked to the Christian lady and the children and their ability to break down childlike innocence, and the ability for that to break down even strong barriers. I've seen that also with my daughter when she distributes books.
Yeah, Prabhu is noting, he's reflecting back about the experience I had with the children, and that he's mentioned childlike innocence and how people breaks down barriers and they take it. And his own daughter, he's seen that. But not always. And this is also an important point. The first time that Kameshwari Dasi, who took over the program of taking the kids out along with other parents on book distribution and very protective circumstances and noting everything that was happening to make sure that we eased into this to see that it was actually beneficial for them. One of the first experiences I remember they had soon after they got started was they got rejected at one door a little vehemently. Have you ever had that happen? That somebody has rejected you? Anyone, or is it just me? 3 people have been rejected in here. The rest of you are really missing out. It's a lot of fun to be rejected. So the kids didn't know what to do when they saw this person open the door and put a frown on her face and then offer a few free words of chastisement, and then close the door rather abruptly on them. And then Kameshwari could see that the kids weren't sure exactly how to take it. After all, being a living entity in a body, one tends to protect one's sense of self. And when somebody says, you're doing the wrong thing or you're no good, we tend to think about it for a little while and see how to process it. So she, along with all the kids, sat down in a nearby playground in a circle, and they talked about it. What does it mean to be rejected, and why did the woman react like that, and so forth. And the kids assimilated the experience, the Kumbh Mela. And then they had something very valuable that you don't often even get when you get an MBA or a PhD, and that is a way to process rejection. And philosophically, also emotionally, and so forth, and that happened again and again in various circumstances with other kinds of reactions that people had, good and bad. And also just the seeing different people's environments. Okay, a couple more reflections. Yes?
Sorry, Maharaj, could we please request, because devotees are realizing because there's something wrong with the circuit of the light there, so could we interrupt you and move your seat a little bit closer?
So I'll just sit here. Go ahead and move me wherever you want. I'm afraid to get up. I got so many wires on me, I don't know what's going to happen. Pardon me? Yeah, questions are fine too. Do we have an extra mic?
I don't think we have a wireless.
No wireless. Okay. I'll repeat.
So you mentioned how you started off in a small house and progressed.
Yeah, we started in a small house and we moved up.
So were you balancing your services along with work, or were you just putting more of the service at that point?
So were we, the community members, balancing service and work at that time? Yes, and still. It's expensive to live in the Bay Area, and people work really hard. And I don't know how they do it, actually. But they have careers, they have children who go to very competitive schools, and they also spend a lot of time doing service. So yeah, the balance has always been there. And so when we thought about this community, I was inspired by Mahaprabhu's teachings to Sanatana Goswami, where after mentioning 64 items of devotional service, he said that there are 5 that are particularly potent, and that if you are in touch with any of these 5, even a little bit, even if you don't have faith in them, you'll make significant advancement in devotional service. And so I felt that if we emphasized these 5 and did the best we could to keep everyone in touch with these 5 items, that following Mahaprabhu's teaching, we would be successful. And so one of them is that we come together as much as possible to hear and chant. And that includes the kids too. Because what I've found is hearing together, like in a group like this, let's just say if we carved out 5 hours in a day, 2.5 hours in the morning, 2.5 hours at night, by the end of the day, just hearing Bhagavatam and discussing the philosophical principles and our realizations about it, we'd feel really enlivened. But people don't necessarily have time for that, nor the taste. Actually, it's never time, it's taste, because everyone gets 24 hours. Doesn't matter where you live. And everyone ultimately decides how they're going to use that 24 hours. And so we emphasized a lot about longer classes because the way people work, they couldn't come together every day. And so when we do come together, and this is still the case, then we have longer classes, up to 2.5 hours, like on a Saturday morning or longer, where everyone, the whole community sits together, or a significant amount are in what we call the live studio audience. Because we've really oriented, when we built our temple, or when we refurbished it, we bought an old church and then redid it. We put a lot of electronics in the walls, huge amounts of wiring. In fact, when Giriraj Maharaj first came to visit our place and he took a bathroom break, he came back and exclaimed, "You even put sound in the bathroom." So when you walk out, you don't miss any of the class. And that was kind of the idea based on a mantra, keep the transcendental vibration going. And that sort of parallels what Mahaprabhu was talking about. If you keep that vibration going, it's very powerful. So, yeah, that's the answer. Yeah. And it's always balancing because it's a rough world. There's a lot of demands on everybody, and what to speak of just staying alive these days, right? That seems to be a challenge. The environment is fraught with danger wherever we go, and circumstances always change. People's lives change. Everyone goes through various eras where they're settled in a certain way, and then they have to go through transition. So we have to, what we found is working on those transitions together and trying to give support as much as possible to the devotees in the community was very helpful. Okay, I'm going to read a few items that you might like. But I was just observing what you have up, like the 5 that you presented, and you're already steeped in this, obviously. So this is just, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, probably, but just we're comparing notes here. So one of my thoughts is that community requires inculcation. Do we have a research department here? Oh, they're out playing. Okay. It would be nice to look at the word inculcate. It's a nice word. It means to repeatedly teach something until it becomes a pervasive attitude or learned lesson. And what I've found is that it's important for a community to have decided upon what attitude is important to be pervasive within the community. And to talk about that means to inculcate it and emphasize it again and again, because there's a Guy Kawasaki, one of the founders of Apple, wrote a book called Art of the Start. And he started quite a few other companies after Apple. One of the directives that he gave that I really appreciated was he said, frame or be framed. If you don't frame what your reality is, what your goals are individually or collectively as a community, then someone else will come along and frame them for you. So decide what attitude you want to be pervasive within your community. And attitude really is the driving force of the community. It's what holds everyone together. So this word inculcation is important, and deciding what attitude. And here are a few of the attitudes that in our experimental community we've inculcated over time. One of them is a principle we call ABS, which stands for Always Better Service. I saw it on the back of a bread truck on the way to the temple one morning, and I said, yeah, we'll steal that one. And I came in and told the devotees, we have a new mantra here, always better service. So what it means is there's an old paradigm in management that if things are getting better, then devotees do more. Devotees, anyone in the organization does more than he or she has to. If things are staying the same, they do just what they have to. And if it's getting worse, then they quit. They don't want to be part of it. And it's subtle. You barely notice it actually when there are improvements going on. You just have this feeling that, wow, this place is pretty nice. It's like, if somebody cleans their room or somebody cleans it for you on a regular basis, you walk in and goes, how come it's so nice in here? I'd like to stay. You may not notice immediately why. You just there's a pervasive attitude of excellence. So one of the practical ways in which we've worked on that over the years is to find out where the gaps are and then make at least 3 improvements every month. And I find this works in one's personal life, in my personal life, and also on a collective level, that if you have a list, like what are the at least 3 things we're going to fix this month? It sounds very simple, but it's a profound principle, because it keeps everybody moving in the right direction. And we call it ABS, always better service. And the next one is called encourage the heck out of everybody. Do you have a heck over here in the UK? I'm not even sure exactly what it is, but it's not good. I was talking to Brahmananda once, and there was some word he said, and I said, what does it mean? He goes, I don't know, but it's not good. Encourage the heck out of everybody. You know how to do that? Do you? All right, just try it out. Turn to somebody next to you and encourage the heck out of them. Come on, do it. Encourage somebody. Nice job, everything you're doing. Yes, really, thank you. I appreciate it. Good job. All right, cut it out. Stop, no more. Don't you hate that when people do that? It's horrible, right? When somebody walks up and goes like, I saw you picking up that trash out there, and I really appreciate it, what you do, your enthusiasm. Actually, the sound you just heard, that's the sound of a healthy community. And you can make that happen by encouraging the heck out of anybody in any circumstance if you do that. But especially community-wide, if that becomes the pervasive attitude. And you can inculcate that. Just remind people that it's important. Years ago, I read a book called The 1 Minute Manager. It's a tiny little book, but this person's method was in management to go around and catch people doing something right. And then take a minute to appreciate what they did right. He said, you hardly ever have to reprimand anybody, because if you don't say anything, then they think, oh, I must have done it wrong. Because they're so used to people or the managers or anybody in the community finding others doing something right. Do you like that one? You can use it anywhere. It's not limited. Yes?
May I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So with a youth group, although not all of our youth are that young anymore, there is, because people are ambitious, not just ambitious in terms of their own desires to serve, but also wanting to expand Prabhupada's movement.
So in youth group, the youth are ambitious to expand within their own community and in Prabhupada's movement in general.
So there is a mood of encouragement, but I've seen over the years that as we've gotten bigger, as projects have gotten bigger, I've noticed an imbalance in terms
They're in the mood of encouragement, but over the years, she's noticed an imbalance.
Yeah, some imbalance in that
Where there's productivity, there's more encouragement.
rather than where there's bhakti. Bhakti is not
With-
necessarily recognized.
Where there's bhakti, like you mean like Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, there's not as much encouragement.
So how do we regain that balance?
We'll just decide on it and then inculcate it. And it really, we decide our own value systems. And in any given circumstance, you can re-examine what you consider to be successful. It requires thought and engineering, like social engineering, to decide what's most important. I'll give you an example in one of the realms that I like to reside in, which is book distribution, partly because I'm driven by goals myself, and I like how measurable it is, and plus, anyway, I won't go into why I like it so much. I'll be here all night. So in that realm, I find that it helps to redefine what success is. For instance, when I hold seminars in various places, I tell devotees the success isn't selling a book. We're not even trying to sell a book. The success is being together and walking out the door and overcoming the fear of crossing the threshold into the great unknown. And whether you sell a book or not, you're successful for walking out and touching the pavement. And then everything after that is extra. So that's a redefinition of success. Previously, it might have been you have to sell not just a book, but a certain number in order to be considered successful. But in our experimental community, we are able to redefine that, reframe it, and then everybody's mood changed towards it. And as far as hearing and chanting and devotional service, it's something to discuss and emphasize that ultimately, although we may have progress in various other ways, the main progress has to take place on the level of developing a taste for hearing. And if you talk about it and you emphasize it, then gradually it can become more of a value. Yes, but yeah, please.
Small follow-up.
Yeah.
What if those who are leading are not open to that kind of redefinition? What if they actually like this wave of productivity that's expanding, that's building? We've got so many more devotees, but where all the boiling of the milk is taking place, the appreciation is not being felt as much as in the areas where there's expansion. And that will lead to people walking out and already have.
I see. Well, oftentimes organizations then become a little self-correcting because once it becomes more pronounced that there may be an imbalance, just like if I don't take care of my body after a while, something will go wrong. And then I'll be forced to make up for it. And then it can be considered. And the balance doesn't mean you're right in the center. It means that you're pulling towards the center as much as possible. There's a wobble effect. You go this way, then you pull back that way. I heard that when an airliner flies from San Francisco to New York, it's only on track about 5% of the time. The rest of the time it's pulling back towards the absolute line that's going from San Francisco to New York. So I stick with my point. It's a matter of inculcation ultimately. And Hare Krishna. Okay, so would you like to hear a couple more? I'm just doing a time check because I tend to be startled all of a sudden whenever I'm speaking somewhere and say, that's it. So what time are we ending? I forget. 3 more minutes?
Yeah, just 3-4 minutes left.
3-4 minutes left. There you have it. Okay. All right. Selfless service is a very satisfying topic to bring up with people because it's the way, according to the Bhagavatam, Savai Pumsam Paro Dharmo, etc., that one can actually feel satisfied. So emphasizing selfless service is important. And then there's humility. You might notice His Holiness Radhanath Swami talks about that quite a bit. In fact, the inculcation principle is something that I spoke to him about many years ago. So why is your community the way it is? And he said, because we emphasize certain things over and over and over again, almost in every class. Then, no aparad. In a community where people don't talk behind others' backs, where you establish that as a vital principle of respecting all Vaishnavas, in fact, all living entities, but especially those in the community. So there's a kind of trust, a bond of trust. And if you have something to work out with somebody, then doing it in a more straightforward way. Another principle is everyone is important and everything counts. In a volunteer organization, every person that comes there is a volunteer and they're important. Prabhupada pointed that out. And to celebrate, even if people do small things, to appreciate that they're doing it. And 6 loving exchanges. They're in the beginning of Rupa Goswami's Upadeshamrita for a reason. It's what the Krishna consciousness movement is founded upon. So they're giving gifts, accepting gifts, giving prasad, accepting prasad, revealing one's mind, and hearing others reveal their minds in confidence, which is kind of what we're doing here. These types of exchanges are the mainstay of our movement. Isn't that nice? Say yes. So Prabhupada says in his purport that this is what the Krishna consciousness, how the Krishna consciousness movement was started. So if you want to start a movement that's really beautiful, you can emphasize these 6 loving exchanges. And if you want your life to be beautiful, then you can just think about how to engage in these loving exchanges. If you think nobody ever gives me anything, and therefore I'm really sad about my life, and I think I'll go out in the garden and just eat some worms because I'm so depressed. It was a song my mom taught me whenever I sulked. I won't sing it now because we're out of time, but it's something that you can then start to become a giver. Think, how can I reach out to others and give? In fact, we've engineered days like that. That's a horrible word to use for that, but social engineering. But there's a way in which, we've had months where we say, okay, it's the 6 loving exchanges month, and let's increase them. And nobody hates it. Do you all hate getting gifts?
No.
Do you hate getting encouraged?
Yeah.
Do you hate when people give you nice prasadam? You don't hate it? That's good. It'll probably work then. Thank you very much, everybody. This is... Yes, Prabhu?
Can I just ask a question on that last point?
I have to ask our judges here in the front.
Yeah, last question.
This is quick. My wife will be surprised if I give a short answer, but let's see if I can do it. Go ahead.
So as the yatras got bigger and bigger, naturally it becomes more impersonal by the nature of the thing. You become a cog in a machine. So how do we use these 6 loving exchanges? To what degree? Are they that you form within sanghas, small pockets of Prabhupada's family, or is it that everyone in the community relates to everyone with those 6 loving exchanges? I'm trying to understand how basically...
Yeah, where it starts and ends is really complicated. But one principle always holds, that everything's personal. You can't grow impersonally. Everything's based on personal relationships, ultimately. And so you'll see some of the best leaders in the world, they take time for people. They'll sit down and listen to everybody. Listen to Prabhupada. He listens to... sometimes I'm listening and it pains me because I'm like, why is this guy wasting Prabhupada's time? And why is Prabhupada taking so much time with this guy? Some of them sound inane. And then there is a point at which Prabhupada stops and says, okay, give him some prasadam, which means, he's out with prasadam in his hand. And so if we remember this principle, everything happens on a personal level. Cesar Chavez had started the Grape Growers Union in California. It was really famous. He organized the workers, and he was just a poor farm laborer himself. And when he got really successful, he was interviewed, and the interviewer asked him, I remember this, they said, so how did you get so successful? He said, I just dealt with one person at a time. They said, come on, tell us how you really did it. And he said, then I talked to another person, then I talked to another person. So if it's one of the values in which we realize how important each individual is in the organization, and that's part of what we do, is we take time with people, or at least give attention when we have the time. and not be in two places at once. Even if you'll have a couple minutes, be really present with people, and that becomes part of the atmosphere, then that tends to help quite a bit. I wrote a lot about, and I did a little video about attention and how powerful it is. It really changes things. Yeah, there's so much more I want to say. I was just really getting started. But I'm so impressed, and so is the world, by the way, with your intention and what you've all done together over time with Pandava Sena, all the generations, and thank you for keeping up this beautiful organization. And please feel free to give your hearts and souls to the process of Krishna consciousness, because ultimately, in the end, that's what matters most. Om Tat Sat. Thank you, everybody. Hare Krishna. Thank you.